May 2nd, 2026, 3 in the morning, Eastern Time. While all of America slept, Spirit Airlines stopped forever. No press conference, no warning to passengers, no final flight with a captain's farewell address. Just a single line on their website, seen that morning by those who had already packed their bags. Spirit Airlines guests should not go to the airport. 60,000 people woke up that day with no flight. 17,000 employees with no job. On one of Spirit's busiest routes, Las Vegas to Dallas, a ticket that cost $39 on the morning of May 1st was selling for $124 by the evening of May 3rd. A 218% increase in 48 hours. 34 years in the sky, 2 bankruptcies in 6 months, and the man who ran it all walked away with more than $5 million in retention and separation payments. Remember that number. We'll come back to it. Because those payments were not a reward for saving the company. The largest piece was approved 6 days before its funeral. This is the story of how airlines die and who really pays the price. Watchdog. To understand how Spirit fell, you first have to understand what it built. And what it built was something almost brilliant. 2015. A small airline with bright yellow planes had one of the highest operating margins in American aviation, around 23.8%. American Airlines was at about 15.1, United at 13.6. A small carrier was out-earning the giants. How? Spirit did something simple and audacious. It turned the airline ticket into a buffet. Where everyone used to pay one price for everything, Spirit said, you only pay for what you take. The flight itself? $29. A checked bag? Extra. Carry-on larger than a backpack? Extra. Choosing a seat next to a friend? Extra. A glass of water on board? Yes, that too. People laughed at it. Greyhound with wings. A bus for the poor, only in the sky. But look at the numbers. Those small fees brought Spirit more than 40% of its revenue. Traditional carriers were usually in single digits, sometimes a little higher, but nowhere near Spirit. The reason Spirit deserves respect, even from people who never flew it. When Spirit entered a new route, ticket prices fell. Not just on Spirit, on everyone. Delta, American, United, down an average of 17%. One yellow plane would arrive in a city and force the giants to drop their fares to stay competitive. Economists named this the Spirit effect. Think about that. Even if you never bought a Spirit ticket in your life, you were almost certainly paying less for flights, simply because Spirit existed somewhere nearby and scared the big players. Spirit was the irritant everyone laughed at, and the watchdog that kept prices honest for everyone. Perfect trap. The trouble is, this beautiful model rested on one condition. Nothing could ever go wrong. Not once. 2019. Spirit stock at an all-time high. The company orders dozens of the latest Airbus A320neo jets, the most fuel-efficient aircraft on the market. The logic was airtight. A new fleet burns less fuel, which means more profit. But what was supposed to be an advantage became a trap. Spirit went all in. One aircraft type, one engine type, as many new planes as possible. It drove down costs, identical parts, cheap to maintain. But it also meant something else. If a manufacturer discovers a production defect, the entire fleet goes in for replacement at once. July 2023. Engine maker Pratt & Whitney discloses a defect. During manufacturing, impurities had entered the metal. Microscopic cracks formed in turbine discs that could grow under operating stress. Every affected engine had to be removed and inspected. That takes months. Delta, American, United had relatively few of these engines. Their fleets were diverse. Spirit had built almost its entire fleet around them. By the end of 2024, 40 Spirit aircraft were grounded. Nearly 1 in 5. Not flying, not carrying passengers, not earning a single dollar, but still requiring payment, leasing fees, parking, insurance. Pratt & Whitney paid up to $200 million in compensation. It wasn't enough. And then a second blow lands at the same time. After the pandemic, the major carriers finally realized that ancillary fees were money, so they copied them. Now Delta offered a bare-bones cheap fare with bag fees on top. Except Delta also had business class, miles, and loyalty programs on the side. Spirit's main weapon was no longer exclusively theirs. The uniqueness was gone. As one aviation analyst put it, Spirit's model had almost no tolerance for external shocks, and external shocks are the norm now. Spirit built a machine that worked perfectly, as long as the world was perfect. The world stopped being perfect. 6 days. In 2022, Spirit had a chance to exit this story differently. 2 chances, actually. 2 airlines came calling. Frontier offered around $2.9 billion, a cleaner deal that the board believed had a better chance of clearing antitrust review. JetBlue offered $3.8 billion, $900 million more. Spirit's board of directors said, "Take Frontier. Less money, but a real deal." JetBlue already had an open antitrust case. The government had just killed their alliance with American Airlines. The board saw the risk. But shareholders voted for JetBlue in October 2022. $33.50 per share. Guess how that turned out. January 2024, a federal court blocks the JetBlue merger, exactly for the reasons the board had warned about. No deal, no money. 2 lost years. 2 years Spirit could have spent saving itself. Instead, it waited for a wedding that was never going to happen. The stock fell to $3. And from there, everything moved fast. 2024, a $1.2 billion loss. November 12th, 2024. The board approves a retention bonus for CEO Ted Christie, $3,800,000. The official reason? To keep the executive in place. November 18th, 2024. Exactly 6 days later, Spirit files for bankruptcy. 6 days. First the bonus, then the bankruptcy filing. One shareholder publicly called this egregious actions. March 2025. Spirit exits bankruptcy. $795 million of debt converted to equity. New investors found. It looked like a second chance. August 29th, 2025. Bankruptcy again. A second time in 6 months. And Ted Christie was already gone, with an additional separation payment of over $1.5 million on top. More than $5 million in retention and separation payments around the collapse of a company that had lost billions. Those same millions from the beginning, now you know where they came from. Last strike. The final blow came from somewhere no one expected. Early 2026, war with Iran. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow passage through which a massive share of the world's oil flows, is blocked. Aviation fuel prices spike, nearly doubling within weeks. Domestic airfares in the United States rose by more than 20%. The major carriers weathered it. They had business class subsidizing economy, loyalty programs, fuel hedged at last year's prices, a cushion. Spirit had none of that. Spirit had no cushion at all. The model never accounted for one. In late April, a group of budget airlines went to Washington and asked for $2.5 billion in temporary government relief. After Spirit's collapse, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said he did not think a low-cost airline bailout was necessary. May 2nd, 3 in the morning. Spirit goes dark. That morning, people arrived at check-in counters at Fort Lauderdale Airport with their bags packed and learned that the airline no longer existed. No one had warned them. Just an empty desk. And 2 weeks later, in a bankruptcy courtroom, Spirit's attorney, Marshall Hubner, said something that lands harder than any statistic. We apologize, most specifically, to those Americans who may now be priced entirely out, many of whom could not otherwise have afforded air travel. What we lost. So what really killed Spirit? Not a bad idea. The idea was honest and almost beautiful. Make flying accessible to those who couldn't otherwise afford it. It died because that idea had no margin for error. Not a single one. One engine maker announced a defect, and a fifth of the fleet went offline. One war on the other side of the world, and fuel became unaffordable. 2 blows were enough, and the world today strikes more than twice. It also died because its main weapon was stolen. The big carriers copied the fees and left Spirit with nothing unique. And that is the oldest way an empire dies. The one advantage it believed was its own turns out to belong to everyone. And it died in front of people who watched the captain of a sinking ship write himself a bonus check 6 days before it went under. But the strangest part of this story isn't the death. It's what came after. Hundreds of thousands of people visited a website. In just a few days, more than $300 million were pledged to bring Spirit back, to resurrect Spirit. The very people who laughed at it, who called it a bus with wings, many of whom had never flown it once. One comment under the news collected hundreds of likes. Even if you never flew Spirit, you'll miss them. They kept the big carriers honest. The watchdog is gone, and only now, as prices surge by hundreds of % on certain routes, does everyone finally understand what they lost. Every empire leaves a body behind. We do the autopsy. Spirit Airlines, 1983 to 2026. The yellow plane that kept prices honest for as long as it could. Next time, an empire whose advantage everyone swore was permanent, until a single machine erased its entire product. It sold the world winter, real ice hauled across the equator, and was certain no invention could ever take its place. It was wrong. Subscribe so you don't miss the next autopsy.